we are going to continue with the chapter, and we will definitely be finishing it today. We don't have that much left, okay? We talked about Egyptian society on Monday, and so we are moving on now to ancient India. And this one is even shorter because, once again, same thing that happened in Mesopotamia and some of those other places, all right? Hunter-gatherers, discover farming, agriculture, domesticate plants, animals, settle down, grow plants on purpose, keep animals, all right? Lots of food, not everyone needs to grow it. Population increases, we get specialization, all of that stuff, all right? And so that happens, bless you, in ancient India as well. Okay, now we refer to it as Harappan India to distinguish it from later Indian history because of one particular city. But before we get there, okay, the reason why, and this is just, hell, I might throw it in on the test. The reason why we call it India is because the earliest societies sprang up along the Indus River, okay? And literally the word India is Greek, and it just means past the Indus River, all right? So it is known as India today. The Indus River is actually, and here's the irony, it's actually in modern day Pakistan, okay? The way things have politically in the last 10,000 years, the way things have happened. Actually, it's only been since the 1940s. That part separated from India, and so it is now Pakistan, although part of the Indus River does run through the western part of India, okay? So around 7,000 BCE, right around, kind of when things started in Mesopotamia, these things begin to happen in India as well. Okay, we begin to see settlements, we begin to see these villages where they do grow, okay, various crops. Now, it takes about 4,000 years before we actually get anything bigger, all right? So it takes a little longer, even though they start at the same time, for them to build up enough of a population and enough of a food production for them to actually then continue their evolution, let's say, okay? But once they do, within 200 years, the entire valley along the Indus River is filled with people, and they, within those 200 years, okay, no farmers, now we have, builders, now we have woodworkers, now we have stonemasons, now we have jewelry, so it happens really, really fast. Okay, so even though, it takes them a while to get to that point, okay? The largest city that we have found there is a city called Mohenjo-Daro, okay? Now, we refer to this period of time as Harappan India after the city of Harappa. And what's different about the city of Harappa is that we have, from the archaeological evidence, it appears that things were actually planned out, all right? It was laid out in the same way a lot of modern cities are, with the pathways. And it's interesting because we do this today because of roads and whatnot, okay? We need it for cars, and earlier, especially in big cities, it was streetcars and horses. But everything in Mohenjo-Daro is laid out on a grid and planned out, okay? And so once again, this is before there were cars to worry about and transit and even wagons, okay? But they realized that, hey, designing our cities this way will make it a lot more efficient, okay? So it was very unusual because we don't see that in a lot of the other ruins. Even in Mesopotamia, people just built shit wherever it happened. And even though they had, temple in the middle, canal, all right, rich people live close to the temple, poor people live out on the edges, everything was just whatever. It just sprang up. Whereas in Harappa, they actually planned it out before they built it, okay? Now, just like everywhere else, okay, it all starts with farming. domestication of plants, domestication of animals. You know, we won't get into it because it happened the exact same way, except one huge difference, all right? In India, they also began to grow cotton. What is cotton good for? Clothes, yes. I'm pretty sure this is a cotton t-shirt, or maybe it's a cotton poly blend. All right, I'm wearing cotton pants. I'm sure most of you are wearing some sort of cotton clothing, all right? This is the first time in history, okay, that humans grow something that is not meant to be eaten, okay? They're growing it to make clothing, all right? And yeah, so obviously this comes after they've developed food and they're not starving to death. And you know, now we have people that are growing cotton because there's probably people that know how to take it and weave it into cloth and then make it into clothing, all right? India is a very hot and humid environment. And so wearing, you know, wool, you know, from sheep and goats and all of that like they did in other places, probably not the best thing. Okay, so they come up with, you know, an alternative type of clothing. All right. In addition, amongst the ruins of Harappan, India, we have found all kinds of pottery, all kinds of tools, all kinds of artwork, all kinds of crafts. So we know that, like I said, they did develop along the same lines that many of the other cities did. Okay. Now, one of the things that keeps us from having a 100% clear picture, all right, they do develop a writing system, just like the Mesopotamians did, and just like the Egyptians did, okay? Similar to cuneiform, it was written on stone tablets, but it is what we call logographic, okay? Logographic is basically a symbol that represents a word. Okay, similar to what we think of like Chinese and Japanese and stuff like that, where a symbol represents an entire word. It doesn't represent a concept. It doesn't represent a sound. Okay, we from the archaeological ruins have found around 400 different signs we've been able to catalog. You know, now, granted, they probably had more words than that, but that's all we've been able to find, and that's all that's survived that we've been able to catalog. The other problem with not only trying to decipher, you know, the different signs and characters and trying to understand the history of Harappan India is that we cannot decipher. We don't know what these symbols mean, okay? When it comes to hieroglyphics, okay, if you recall, in 1799 we discovered the Rosetta Stone, which translated the old hieroglyphics in the old Egyptian language into Greek, and then from Greek we've been able to translate it into other languages, so we know what it says. When it comes to cuneiform, and we'll talk about it more in the next chapter, when Sargon conquers Sumeria, he takes the cuneiform and begins to use it. He applies it to his culture. And then there's going to be like other conquerors that are going to come through and conquer that area. And they're going to be like, hey, this system of writing, whoa. And so then they'll adopt it into their language. All right. Very similar to the way that, well, I wrote assignment due today over there. That's in English. I also teach Spanish. I could write the exact same thing in Spanish. We use the same alphabet. It's just different words, all right? It's going to, you know, have A's and S's and D's and T's and all of that, okay? Just in a different pattern, all right? And so other cultures adopted cuneiform. And so, yeah, that's why we can, you know, kind of understand it today and able to interpret it. Nobody did that with Harappan. Once it was gone, and all we're left with are these cool little pictures and designs with no idea what they mean, okay? Now, some of the other stuff that we have found evidence that they traded with people as far west as modern-day Turkey, because we have found Mesopotamian artifacts, we've found different metal, we've found cedar. So we know that they traded. We know that somehow they had contact with these other cultures, all right? And by 1700 BCE, the society just collapsed. It disappeared. We really don't know what happened to it, whether it was disease or some kind of natural disaster or whatever. All we know is that, without them there to control the river flooded over, buried the remnants of the city, and they weren't found until like the 1800s when archaeologists go through and we're like, holy shit, we've just found a whole new society. All right, what is going on here? Okay, and so yeah, unless we find, which we probably won't, something to help us translate, some of the ancient writings that we have from them, we really won't know like more about their society or what happened to them. All right, but the most important thing, all right, is that they were the first to cultivate something, to grow something that was not meant to be eaten. All right. These are the ruins of Harappa, okay, that you can find in modern-day Pakistan along the Indus River. And so this is how we have, basically extrapolated all of this stuff, all right? And of course, this map is from your textbook. It shows the location. Mohenjo-Daro was the largest of the cities, but Harappa is the one that we use to kind of define the society, only because of the way it was designed and it was laid out, all right? Questions on India? Then we will move on to China, okay? Now, China is kind of a little bit of an anomaly amongst these four cultures that we're looking at. Like Mesopotamia, all right? Chinese society developed along two rivers, okay? Unlike Mesopotamian society, those rivers weren't next to each other. They were actually like thousands of miles away. So we had two Chinese societies kind of grow side by side along these rivers. But, all right, the rivers were pretty different. And so this is reflected in how Chinese society develops, okay? The first is the Yangtze River. Now, you'll see it spelled different ways just because of the translation. Sometimes it's spelled with a T-Z-I, sometimes it's with a T-Z-E-E, sometimes with a Z-E-E. All right, those are all the same. It just depends on who translated it, okay? Your textbook chose that spelling, so we're going with what your textbook has. All right, the Yangtze has for thousands of years been called China's blessing, okay? Because it is a very stable river. It is very deep. It is very reliable, okay? Rarely flooding, rarely, okay? It is a very peaceful, calm, tranquil river, and so obviously different societies develop along that river, and when they needed water in other places, it was fairly easy to dig very primitive canals to channel the water into other areas, okay? The Yangtze is located in southern China, all right? Now, thousands of miles away to the north is the Yellow River, all right? This has been called China's curse or China's sorrow, all right? It is capricious, it floods, it destroys stuff, all right? Throughout China's history, it has always been this crazy thing. During the spring rains, it floods and destroys stuff. In the winter, it floods and destroys things. Even today, like the Chinese government has put dams in different parts of the Yellow River, and they have built up levees and dikes to try to. It still destroys shit. All right, even with modern technology. All right, so you have these two rivers. Okay, and so because of this, Chinese society in the north takes a lot longer to develop, okay? Yeah, oh, here's a river. It floods. It gives us fertile land. Let's plant stuff. And guess what? A month later, it floods again and just destroys everything and kills people. All right? And so the next group comes along. Oh, hey, here's some land. They try to sell, and boom, it just destroys them, kills them, and people go along their way. Okay? Now, as I put there, that the development is slower. Okay? So, number one, the Yellow River. Okay? For whatever progress that the Chinese made, the Yellow River would destroy it. Okay, so it was very difficult to advance if all of your things are constantly being washed away. Okay, number two, there aren't a lot. Yes, Jade. It's just the way we'll talk about different Chinese dynasties, but it's where one of the dynasties decided, this was the best place to put it. Yeah. So, there's not a lot of domesticatable animals in this part of China. All right, no goats, no sheeps, no any of that. So they're relying mostly on what little crops they can grow and whatever they can hunt. Okay. Now, later on, when the southern culture migrates, okay, they do find, right, animals in the south, okay? And does anyone remember what they're the first to domesticate one particular type of bird? Chickens, yes. And like I said, as a rooster attack survivor, all right, I'm going to start a support group. I got attacked. They poked my belly, all right? I was 6 years old. Yeah, I'm still traumatized. I'm in my 50s, and I still have flashbacks. Can you truly domesticate chickens? I mean, she's going, no. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you can, maybe not. All right, but yeah, and just for the sake of having fun here, what do we get from chickens? Eggs and meat, chicken. Yeah. Versus cow. All right. Yeah, even if you do have a chicken, I mean, come on, like it's feeding Quinn and that's it. All right. He's a big guy. You're like, yeah, family bucket, KFC, all for me. But the cow, I mean, come on, we're all coming to the barbecue. All right. So yeah. And okay, you're like eggs. All right, yeah, but I can do 2 or 3 just on my own. I don't know, like what, 5, 6 egg omelet? Yeah. He's like, that sounds about right. I've seen some of you in the dining hall getting like the scrambled eggs, just a big plate. No. Yeah. You're like, yeah, I do that. Type of thing. So yeah. It takes longer because of this lack of animals. All right. I'll show you the map in a minute. Similar to Egypt, but even more extreme, okay? To the west and to the southwest, there are nothing but mountains, all right? They're not just any mountains, though. They're the Himalayas. Jade, you're smiling. Why are you smiling? Yes, it's not only the largest, those are the tallest mountains on the planet, all right? Mount Everest, the tallest peak, is in the Himalayas. All right, so it's not like, okay, let's just hike over the Adirondacks. No, you're hiking over mountains that are like 30-something thousand feet up, higher than airplanes fly. Like people literally die up there. All right, for a while I was obsessed with Everest, and it wasn't the death part that scared me. It was like you got to pay like $100,000 to be able to climb it. So I'm like, all right, no shit, I'm gonna stay in New York. All right, but for a while I was like, dude, I can do this. All right, I've got the winter gear, I've got boots, I can get into shape. $100,000? No, I can't do it. All right, but yes, number one, you've got those mountains that nobody's crossing. Okay, to the north, all right. You have probably second or third to the Sahara Desert and the Arabian Desert. You have the Gobi Desert, which is huge and dry and arid and nothing grows there. All right. So if you're going to make it across, good luck. All right. So let me show you the map. Okay. Himalayas, all right, the Taklamakan Desert, the Gobi Desert, and so China was completely isolated. So even Mesopotamia, even Harappan India had contact with other people, all right? Even though Egypt was isolated, it had that one little strip through the Sinai and into Palestine. It could communicate with other groups. China could not. So that's the other thing that slowed it down in its development. Here's the Yellow River, okay, in northern China. Here's the Yangtze, okay, in southern China. So most of the early society that lasts is along the south, okay? Even though we see settlements in the north, those would come and go, all right, because of it, all right? Now, we've talked about how, and I didn't put it up there, but you should remember rice, okay? Rice was the crop that they grew. The other thing that they grew was millet, and millet is another type of grain that can be used to make bread-like foods, okay? Now, in the north, okay, along the Yellow River, we see the earliest culture we have there is the Yangshao culture, and we call those type of people, or the way they lived, slash and burn agriculture, because after a couple hundred years, they realized that they could grow stuff, but then they would have to destroy it and move somewhere else. So either they destroyed it or the river would. Oh, that was both. Okay. Yeah, I forgot to put it up there, but I'm not trying to be racist, but China rice, okay, that was their crop. All right, that was their thing. Okay, and then yes, along the Yellow River, along the north, you had millet, which was a bread type of substance. Okay, and so yeah, the Yangshao remained very, very primitive for a long time. Okay, now in the south, and this is why I put them like north, top, south, the Longshan culture. Okay. It grows up, or it develops along the Yangtze River, okay? It begins to spread because they're dealing with a nice, calm, gentle river, doesn't destroy their stuff, doesn't, flood, doesn't, and yeah, what slows them down is this lack of contact with other people, and there's not a whole lot of, animals that can be domesticated, so they're limited to very primitive agriculture, but eventually they do begin to grow, okay? We have found, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Sorry, Maria. Okay. I kicked her butterfly. We have found pottery and tools, okay, in southern China that we attribute to the Longshan culture, okay? In addition, as they begin to spread, obviously they can't take canals, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, all right? And so little by little, we have discovered that they began to dig wells in different areas. And that's kind of like here in upstate New York, a lot of people will dig wells and find the water table and bring water up. I don't know how many of you live on farms and have well water. Same technology, just thousands of years later, okay? But yeah, the concept is the same, all right? And of course, we also have found that, yes, they encountered other cultures that they had to defend themselves against. But eventually, these cultures come together, all right, into one society, all right? So this begins to grow and spread. This remains a very primitive culture, okay? So we see the development of two different areas, okay? Finally, all right, after a couple, 1,000 years, the Longshan becomes the Liangzhu culture, all right? This is where we see the first government. Up until now, the people are just living, okay? Kind of without rules, kind of without, we promise we'll behave. And they pretty much did for a couple hundred years, no conflicts, no nothing. So it wasn't until this point in time that we finally get a early governmental system, okay, where we have a ruler and rules put into place. Because by now, the society has grown to a point where they do need, all right, those rules. We begin to see what we call advanced farming. They're not limited to just rice. They're beginning to grow millet and other vegetables and other things, okay? By now, they've wandered far enough south so that they have discovered pigs and sheep, okay? Just like in other areas, all right? And we already know, okay, pigs, we get meat and ham and bacon and all kinds of yummy stuff. What do we use their leather for? Shoes and clothing as well, okay? They discover sheeps, okay? What do we use sheep for? Wool. What else? Meat and? Yeah, you can drink sheep's milk. I know I didn't show you a picture of it, but you can drink sheep's milk. All right, so now we have more than just rice and eggs and chicken. All right, so yes, we're having, we're expanding here. In the South, they also find dogs. So in this case, remember that dogs were the first animal ever domesticated. So, now they're being put to work, companionship, etc. And they don't discover cows, but they discover water buffalo, which is very similar to cattle. All right. FYI, I spent 6 months in Vietnam teaching 10 years ago now. Okay. Literally, yesterday was the anniversary of me leaving America for 6 months. All right. So 10 years ago, 2014. Some of you were just babies. They have water buffalo, and it's kind of good. All right. So yeah, water buffalo. It's like cattle. It's like cow. You eat it the same way. You use it for milk. You use it for leather. You know all that other stuff. Okay. I have a selfie with a couple water buffaloes. They're afraid of humans. The tame ones, the domesticated ones. It's weird. But anyways, okay. Now, what begins to happen, or what happens to this culture? So this is like another setback. All right. China enters a period of drought. All right. And so the areas where people were relying on wells and things like that, those collapse, those fall apart, because without rain, the wells dry up, and without water, nothing's going to grow. All right. So in this case, we see those settlements completely collapse. The Liangzhu society disappears. People starve and die, and boom, society is gone. The people up in the north, remember, they're constantly being destroyed by the Yellow River, so nothing's happening there. So China takes a step back, during this time. But from the ruins, we do see that they were just starting to reach that point, like where we see in Mesopotamia and Egypt, that they develop an actual society and become united. So it's going to take a couple thousand years longer, all right, because it's basically been wiped away. All right. Questions on China? All right. We're going to look now at some of the minor areas, and I promise, this goes really quickly, okay? Because in the other areas, we don't have major rivers. We don't have all of those elements that allowed, Egypt and Mesopotamia and India to flourish, to become a society. Okay, so first we're going to look at Greece, all right, because Greece is one of the earliest societies in Europe that does develop. Okay, we'll talk about this more when we actually get into Greek history, the chapter on Greek history, but the actual land of Greece is very rocky and very hilly. So it's not the best for agriculture, number one. Most of them are islands, okay? So there is a separation amongst the different Greek peoples. So, being separated by, it's small bits of ocean, but being separated like that kind of keeps them from uniting the way, once again, Sumer and Akkad and Egypt and all of them do. Okay, so we do get some small cities, though. They do, the village, the town, the little city. Okay, they do go through that process. Okay, there is evidence that they had contact with both Egypt and Mesopotamia, so they were able to obtain, bronze and other technology, and they were able to gain various knowledge and whatnot. Okay, and of course, we do see evidence of some farming, otherwise those cities wouldn't have grown. all right? In the little patches of land that aren't rocky and hilly, the Greeks were able to grow things, okay? And of course, if they do have contact with Egypt and Mesopotamia, especially Mesopotamia, they were able to trade the metals that they found in the hills of Greece, you know, because what are the Mesopotamians making? Bronze, yeah, okay. They were able to trade some of those metals for food, so, you know, they're able to do those things. All right? Are you sure you want to leave your butterfly with me? I'm joking. All right? Now, the place where we do see the first semblance of a civilization, of society, is on the island of Crete. Okay? Crete is a pretty good-sized island to the south of Greece. Okay? The capital city of Crete is the city of, I say Knossos just to be a weirdo, but it's actually Knossos. The K is silent, as in most Greek words. K's, P's, Q's are all silent. All right? But the city of Knossos. All right? Now, if you are semi-familiar with Greek mythology, all right, the city of Knossos supposedly was the home of a society known as the Minoans. And in the city of Knossos, there was this giant thing called a labyrinth, all right? And according to Greek mythology, you would be put in the labyrinth as a punishment for different crimes. And in the middle of a labyrinth was the Minotaur, okay? Does anyone know if you know your mythical creatures, what is a Minotaur? Jade? Half man, half bull, yes. All right, and part of the challenge was not only to make it through this labyrinth, this maze, to get out, but you also had to avoid the Minotaur and not get killed by this man-bull thing, okay? I forget, you know, like the top was bull, the bottom was man. It was like a bull that walked on two legs, all right, type of thing, okay? So most people know that, at the very least, that about the island of Crete and the city of Knossos. All right. Talking about actual history, though, the area was filled with gold and other metals. Okay, and so basically, this is how they were able to obtain things from other places. Okay, they traded their metal, they traded their gold. Mesopotamians brought them food. Egyptians brought them food. Yeah, but that's late. That's a couple thousand years later. Okay, but yeah. All right, so ancient Greece. Okay, now you do need to know this. All right, Anatolia, modern day Turkey. Okay, Anatolia is its ancient name. Turkey is today. Okay, also not a lot of farmland. Anatolia is where the Mesopotamians got some of their metals, their tin and their copper to make bronze. It is also where they got most of their wood, most of their cedar to make wooden objects, okay? This would also be the closest place where they could get like good like stone. So this is where they would quarry, you know, and bring it down to Mesopotamia and make it into various statues and other stone objects, okay? And so because of this, all right, most of the settlements were strictly just these very small trading outposts or little mining outposts where if you were like a Mesopotamian, you show up, I've got food, I almost said bronze, I need copper and tin, all right, so they trade, all right. Yeah, I got food for you, I need, you know, a shipment of wood, you know, we're going to do, you know, woodworking back in Mesopotamia, so they would trade. Okay, the only major city, and this was on the west coast of Turkey, bordering Greece, was the city of Troy. Okay, for the well, let me back up again. Greek mythology or Greek stories, this is the city that the Greeks fought during the Trojan War. For hundreds of years, people thought it was just a myth. It was part of this mythology. Turns out, they discovered it like in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They discovered the ruins and realized, holy shit, the city of Troy was real. All right. And so we come to discover that, yeah, there really was a war between the ancient Greeks and the Trojans. All of the mythical stuff probably didn't have, there was probably no goddess and, give the apple to the most prettiest and, all of the other like magical things that, Achilles couldn't be killed unless he was stabbed in his ankle. All of that probably made up, but it was an actual war between the Greeks and the Trojans. Okay, and so amongst the ruins, apparently it was a very prosperous and cosmopolitan city, because we have found gold and silver and metals and precious objects and food, like all of these things. They had an early form of writing. And of course, a lot of the archaeological stuff that we have found shows us that, yeah, they had bronze from Mesopotamia. They had objects from Egypt. And of course, the fact that they fought this war with the Greeks, they also had contact with Greece. All right. Now, later on in history, when we talk about like the Persians and all of that, the city of Troy will still be there, but it will now be populated exclusively by Greeks. Okay. The Greeks have gone out and settled in the area. All right. But for now, all right, the city really did exist. And we think there probably was a war between the Trojans and the Greeks. Okay, were the gods involved? Probably not. All right, but like most legends, there is a very, very small semblance of truth usually associated with them. Okay, and so once again, showing you this map. All right, the purple areas are the major societies that we looked at. The green areas are, like Greece and Turkey and Crete are those minor, little minor things. But of course, they did have a lot of the things that those major societies needed, to create things. And so, yes, they came into contact with each other. What don't you see on here? If I had a bigger map, China. Okay? And so that's why their development was way, way slower, because they did not have the advantage of, being able to contact other groups and whatnot. Okay? Now, remember when I say Europe, I'm talking about Central and Northern Europe. All right? Unless I tell you specifically. Okay? Now, no major rivers in this area either. Okay? During these times, and even into some modern periods, most of Central and Northern Europe is covered by forests. All right? So if you want to even get that start where you start farming, what's the first thing you have to do? Clear the land, get rid of the trees. We don't have mega chainsaws that you can get down at Lowe's and just start cutting down trees. And we don't have stump grinders that we can remove the stumps and take care of it in a weekend or, a couple days, whatever. All right. So if we can't get that farming base, you're not going to get, okay, settle down, excess of food, people stop starving. Now we can create like other professions. Now we have the woodworker, the stonemason, the tree. No, okay, we can't even get rid of the trees. All right, so we're stuck over here. Okay, and so the tribes that were around lived predominantly by hunting and warfare. Okay, they fought each other. All right, they took things from each other. All right. Yes, there was some agriculture, because that's not to say that they didn't clear some trees. They just couldn't do the whole damn forest. All right. They could get a couple trees out of the way, and so they would have very small plots of land that they farmed. Okay. They do discover metals, and so they engage in mining. But for the most part, it was a very warlike and hunting society. Okay? Now, eventually they do discover and they domesticate cattle. All right? We already know what we get from cattle. Any other meat source or any other whatever source, they would hunt. Okay? The only thing that they actually tamed, and we're talking, thousands of years ago, not like, Middle Ages time, but thousands of years ago was just cattle, all
all right? Everything else was hunted, or they would fight another tribe. They're like, dude, they've got some cool shit, let's go take it from them, all right? And so they would fight each other for it, okay? Now, eventually, because like I said, when Sargon conquers, Sumer, the knowledge that comes from there gets spread, including the knowledge of how to make bronze. And so over time, we're talking about a couple hundred years, okay, that knowledge of how to make bronze reaches Central Europe, okay? And so there is a lot of copper in the area. So they're like, okay, now we just got to find this other shit called tin, and they eventually do. So they're able to make a lot of bronze stuff. It is then with bronze tools that they are able to, do more clearing, do more building, do a little bit more. All right. One of the things that these early societies are known for, and that we remember them, are the various stone monuments that they left behind. Because now that they have these stronger tools, they are able to build, other things, and they're able to carve into the various stone objects. So this map then just shows, the green area shows where some farming does develop, all right? But if you notice, it's all in the southern, part of Europe, all right? Little bit in central France, which does have pretty good soil and stuff, but everywhere else is predominantly covered in forest, all right? So you do have that very primitive lifestyle, all right? This is the most famous of those stone monuments that were developed. This is Stonehenge in England, but throughout Europe, there are others. This one just happens to be the one that everybody knows and everybody goes visits. I once had one of the international students from Spain that was like, you need to go to the one in Spain because nobody knows about it and nobody goes, and you can go there and like still touch it and do all this crazy shit. And it's not as big as Stonehenge, bless you, but it's there also. So, but these can be found in different parts of Northern and Central Europe, okay? We'll finish off, we've just got the Americas and Africa, all right? Same thing, once again, no major rivers, okay? Now, some people are like, but Santos, Mississippi, Amazon, all right? And yes, but you got to give us a couple thousand years. One of the first complex societies in North America, the Cahokia, did develop along the Mississippi River, okay? The Amazon is a little different because it's surrounded by like the densest, most dangerous jungle on the planet. Plus, even in the water, there's shit like piranha and, human-eating snakes and all this other fun stuff. Capybara, no, they're not dangerous, but they are in the river. So not exactly the best. So what we get, all right, is along the coast, we do get fishing villages, okay? People that live off of fishing, but then also they do grow, certain things, all right? And so because of this, we do see a very early type of society. They don't move into the city, complex civilization stage, but we do have little villages, all right, up and down the coast that live a very simple life. Where we begin to see a little bit more development is in Mexico, and that is because of the domestication of corn, all right? Corn is a Mexican thing, you're welcome. And so because of this, based on a society, on an agriculture of corn, we begin to see the rise of little villages, but it's several thousand years before we get any kind of major society, all right? It's just very simple villages, okay? When it comes to Africa, all right, outside of the Nile River, okay, there is also no major thing in Africa, all right? And so many of the early villages that arise, we do see a lot of hunting and we do see a lot of fishing, many of these early societies develop around the only bodies of water they can find, which are lakes. Okay, because there is no giant river like the Nile. All right. We do have this huge, big ass desert throughout most of northern Africa. So that prevents, like, pretty much any society from developing there outside of Egypt. All right. Now, south of the Sahara, okay, we do end up seeing then societies that live in stone dwellings, that have, some very, very early technology. All right. But once again, because of no major river, no major contact, no major anything, they're little villages, and that's it. Okay, it doesn't grow beyond that. All right. And I think, yes. Questions, comments? All right, before you run away, got to show you my travel logs here. Okay. Yes, I have been to Stonehenge. Okay. I have more pictures, but I only put one up. All right. Now, Stonehenge. It's literally in the middle of nowhere if you ever go. All right, or if you've been. Okay. You used to be able to walk amongst it and touch it, but as humans tend to do, people started to graffiti it. They started to tag it. People started to like chip parts of it away to say, this came from Stonehenge and I have it, okay? And then the worst offenders of them all would tip them over, all right? Because for whatever reason, it's fun to tip over a 5,000-year-old monument. So there is a little wall around it now that you can't go past. And it's not so much, it's not like a really big thing. It's literally like deer netting, like what people around here use to keep squirrels out of your garden. All right, but you really can't get that close anymore. All right, and there are like cops and stuff there, like to kind of like stand back. All right, type of thing. All right. Now, ignore my son. When people ask, like, okay, so how did they move this stuff? How did they put stuff there? They didn't have the wheel. Okay, the Mesopotamians invented it, but hasn't reached England yet. So they basically had a very simple log mechanism. You put logs underneath and you start pulling, and then someone is in the back, and you got to come over, bring it, put the log in front, then you move the next log, and that's how they moved them into place. Okay, and then finally, they also have demonstrations and setups of the early homes of Central and Northern European peoples. All right, just very simple mud huts with thatched roofs. All right, so very, very basic, very primitive dwellings. So if you ever go to England, all right, definitely check out Stonehenge. Assignment due, don't forget, if you haven't turned it in yet, you will start chapter 3 on whatever day that is, Friday.